The coordinates were written on a linen napkin. 40 degrees. 57 minutes north. 72 degrees. 17 minutes west. My stepfather, Douglas, pressed it into my hand like it was a secret. He told me it was the location for the sunrise brunch. A test run for Sierra's engagement party. I needed to check the sightlines, he said. I walked for 40 minutes. The heat rising off the dunes made the air shimmer like a mirage. When I reached the spot, there was nothing, just sand, scrub grass, and the relentless Atlantic Ocean. Then I heard the engine. I turned just in time to see the black SUV crest the ridge. My sister, Sierra, leaned out the window, laughing. "Let's see if the maid can handle a 5-mile hike in those cheap sandals," she screamed. The tires spun, kicking up a cloud of dust that coated my tongue. They drove away. They left me there without water, without my phone, without anything but the burning sand and the realization that I was entirely alone. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't scream. I didn't chase the car. I just stood there and watched the dust settle. The silence of the dunes wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. It felt like the physical manifestation of the silence I had lived in for years. You see, silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's a habit. It's a survival mechanism. For 15 years, I had been the ghost in my own family's mansion. I was the one who made sure the ice buckets were filled. The reservations were confirmed. And the secrets were kept. I was Madeline, the estate manager for my own parents. Unpaid and unacknowledged. They called it earning my keep. I called it an internship in hell. My stepfather, Douglas, was a venture capitalist whose ventures usually capitalized on other people's misery. My mother, Victoria, was a socialite whose only skill was marrying up and looking the other way. And Sierra? She was the golden child. The one who floated through life on a cloud of unearned privilege. They treated me like a regrettable overhead cost. A line item they couldn't quite erase. And I let them. I absorbed their insults like a sponge. I nodded when they criticized my clothes, my career, my very existence. Standing there on that beach, looking at the empty horizon, I finally understood why. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't cowardice. It was strategy. You don't scream at a tiger when your head is in its mouth. You wait. You stay still. You breathe shallowly so it forgets you're even there. You become invisible. Because the only way to survive a predator is to make them think you are prey that has already been consumed. I had been playing dead for 15 years. I had let them think they owned me. I had let them believe I was too broken to fight back. But as the sun beat down on my neck and the salt air filled my lungs, I realized something. The tiger had opened its mouth. They had driven away. They had left me for dead. Which meant they weren't watching me anymore. They thought I was stranded. They didn't know I was free. I took off my sandals. The sand was hot. But I didn't care. I started walking. Not back toward the resort. Not back toward them. I walked north. Toward the fishing village I knew was a few miles up the coast. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. My mind was a cool, clear lake. I calculated the distance. I estimated my hydration levels. I planned my route. It was purely transactional. My body was an asset I needed to transport to safety. My emotions were liabilities I couldn't afford to carry. I walked for an hour before I saw the boat. It was a weathered fishing trawler, docked at a small, private pier. An old man was mending nets on the deck. I walked up to him. I didn't beg. I didn't explain. I reached into the hidden pocket of my dress, the one place I kept the emergency fund I'd been skimming from the grocery budget for 3 years, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't cash. It was a prepaid Uber voucher I had printed out months ago. Just in case. I need a ride to the train station, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Rough. New. I can pay you. He looked at me. At my dusty dress. My bare feet. The steel in my eyes. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded and started the engine. As the boat pulled away, I watched the coastline recede. I watched the luxury resort where my family was probably laughing over cocktails shrink until it was nothing but a white speck against the green. I didn't look back with longing. I looked back with the cold precision of an architect surveying a demolition site. I wasn't just leaving the Hamptons. I was leaving the person they had made me. Madeline, the victim, was staying on that beach. The woman on the boat? She was someone else entirely. She was the one who was going to burn it all down. I didn't go to therapy. I went to work. 15 years evaporated in a blur of relentless efficiency. I didn't just survive, I optimized. I started as a night concierge, scrubbing floors in a hotel lobby while studying finance manuals I found in the recycling bin. By 25, I was managing a penthouse in Manhattan. By 30, I was the invisible hand behind 3 of the largest private estates on the East Coast. I became a ghost again. But this time, I was a ghost with a 6-figure salary and a Rolodex of contacts that could open any door in New York. My clients loved me because I was discreet, precise, and utterly devoid of drama. I managed their lives with the cold logic of an algorithm. I fixed their problems before they knew they had them. I was indispensable, and while I built my empire of silence, my family began to starve. It started 5 years after I left. The first call came on a Tuesday. Douglas. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Madeline. His voice cracked. We need to talk about your allowance. Things are tight. I saved the recording. I labeled it evidence number 1. Over the next decade, the calls became a ritual. 107 missed calls. 107 voicemails. They shifted from demands to pleas. From anger to desperation. Douglas wasn't a genius investor. He was a gambler on a losing streak. Victoria's socialite lifestyle was a furnace that burned cash faster than he could steal it. They were drowning. And they thought I was their life raft. They didn't know I was the iceberg. I didn't just listen. I investigated. I used my network to dig into Douglas's past dealings. That's how I found Nathaniel. Nathaniel was a forensic accountant who had once been Douglas's partner. Douglas had framed him for embezzlement 10 years ago to cover his own tracks, stripping Nathaniel of his license and his reputation. I found him working as a bookkeeper for a bakery in Queens. I didn't offer him pity. I offered him a job. I want to audit a ghost, I told him, sliding a file across the flour-dusted table. Douglas Vance. Nathaniel didn't blink. He opened the file, and for the first time in years, I saw a spark of life in his eyes. It was the look of a man who had just been handed a loaded gun. It took us 6 months to untangle the web. We followed the paper trail through shell companies and offshore accounts. And then, we found it. The smoking gun. The kill shot. The deed to the Hamptons estate, the symbol of their status. The venue for Sierra's upcoming engagement party wasn't just bought with bad money. It was bought with my money. Nathaniel projected the document onto the wall of my office. It was a transfer authorization from 15 years ago. Dated 2 weeks after my biological father died in a car accident. It liquidated his entire life insurance policy and the trust he had set up for me, $1,800,000. The signature at the bottom was Madeline Vance. But 15 years ago, I was 17. I didn't have a signature. I had a curfew. Douglas had forged my name. He had stolen my future to buy the walls he used to imprison me. I stared at the screen. I didn't feel rage. Rage is hot. It burns out. I felt cold. Absolute zero. I looked at Nathaniel. He didn't just steal my money, I said, my voice steady. He stole the house. Nathaniel grinned. A sharp, dangerous expression. And according to this foreclosure notice I just pulled, he's about to lose it. I looked at the 107th voicemail notification blinking on my phone. They weren't calling to apologize. They were calling because they needed a bailout. They were desperate. They were sloppy. They were ready. The invitation arrived in my inbox at 3 a.m. It wasn't a paper card with gold leaf. They wouldn't waste postage on a ghost. It was a digital forward, sent to an email address I hadn't used in a decade, one I kept active solely for this moment. Subject: The Vance Legacy Gala and Sierra's engagement, regrets only. The body of the email was written by Douglas. I could hear his voice in every condescending syllable. Madeline, we assume you are still finding your way in the world. We are hosting a grand anniversary gala to celebrate 30 years of success and to announce Sierra's engagement to Preston St. Cloud. We are also finalizing the private sale of the Hamptons estate to an international conglomerate for a record-breaking sum. We are moving on to bigger things. We know your circumstances likely prevent you from attending an event of this caliber, and we certainly don't expect a gift given your situation. But we wanted to be gracious enough to inform you of the family's continued ascent. Don't bother replying. We know you can't make it. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Nathaniel. They took the bait, I said, putting the phone on speaker. Hook, line, and sinker, Nathaniel replied, his voice crackling with static. They think they've found a white knight. They have no idea. Apex Holdings is a shell company registered to a P.O. box in Queens that I check once a week. Douglas was drowning. My intelligence reports showed he had leveraged the estate to the hilt to cover bad crypto bets and Victoria's credit card bills. He needed to sell the house to pay off the sharks. But his ego wouldn't let him do it quietly. He had to turn a fire sale into a victory lap. He had to make it look like a strategic pivot, not a desperate liquidation. He thought he was selling the house to a faceless corporation that would let him lease it back for appearances. He thought he had outsmarted the market. He thought he was safe. That is the fatal flaw of the narcissist. They believe they are the main character in everyone else's story. Douglas assumed I was destitute because he couldn't imagine a world where I succeeded without him. He assumed the mystery buyer was his savior because he couldn't imagine a world where he faced consequences. He mistook my silence for defeat. He didn't realize it was the silence of a sniper adjusting for wind. The wire transfer is scheduled for midnight. Mid-gala, Nathaniel said. The moment the funds clear, the deed transfers to the LLC. And the LLC belongs to you. And the foreclosure notice? Printed on heavy cardstock. I'm bringing the physical copies. I looked at the invitation on my screen. The dress code was gilded glamour. It was a costume party for people pretending they weren't bankrupt. I clicked reply. I didn't write a long diatribe. I didn't unleash 15 years of trauma. I typed 2 words. Accept. I hit send. I wasn't going as a guest. I wasn't going as a daughter. I was going as the new owner. And I had some renovations to make. Starting with the locks, the driveway was lined with Bentleys and Rolls Royces. A parade of chrome reflecting the floodlights. The estate looked exactly as I remembered it, imposing, manicured, and completely soulless. The theme was gilded glamour. And my mother had taken it literally. Gold silk draped from the portico. A string quartet played Debussy by the infinity pool. Waiters circulated with trays of caviar and truffle arancini. It was a masterclass in distraction. If you dazzle the eye enough, no one notices the rot in the foundation. I watched from the back of my town car. The tint on the windows was dark enough to hide me, but I could see them perfectly. Douglas stood on a raised dais in the center of the ballroom, holding a crystal flute. He looked the part of the benevolent patriarch tuxedo sharp. Smile practiced. Beside him, Victoria glittered in sequins, playing the dutiful wife. And Sierra. Sierra was preening. She held up her left hand to anyone who would look, flashing a diamond that I knew was bought on credit. Her fiancé, Preston St. Cloud, looked bored, swirling his scotch like he wished he were anywhere else. I checked my watch. 11:55 p.m. Showtime, I whispered. I stepped out of the car. I wasn't wearing the maid's uniform they remembered. I wasn't wearing the dusty sundress from the beach. I wore a gown of liquid gold silk that clung to me like armor. Structured and severe. My hair was slicked back. Sharp. My heels clicked against the marble steps with the rhythm of a ticking clock. I walked past the security checkpoint. They didn't ask for an invitation. When you walk with enough ownership, people assume you built the place. I entered the ballroom just as the music swelled. Douglas tapped a spoon against his glass. The room quieted. Friends. Family. Esteemed investors. Douglas boomed, his voice projecting that false warmth I loathed. Tonight is a celebration of legacy. For 30 years, the Vance name has stood for integrity, for resilience. We have built this home not just with bricks, but with values. I stopped in the center of the room. The crowd parted around me, sensing a disruption in the atmosphere. And tonight, Douglas continued, oblivious. We turn a new page. As many of you know, we have entered into a strategic partnership with an international firm, Apex Holdings. They recognize the immense value of this estate. And while it is bittersweet to sell our family home, we know it is going into the hands of a buyer who respects its history. He raised his glass higher. To the future, to the future. The crowd murmured. Actually, Douglas, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. Douglas froze. He lowered his glass, squinting against the stage lights. Victoria gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Sierra dropped her arm, the diamond suddenly heavy. Who said that? Douglas demanded, his smile faltering. I stepped into the pool of light. I did. A ripple of confusion went through the guests. They looked from me to the stage. They didn't recognize me. Why would they? They had never looked at the help. Madeline? Victoria whispered. It was a sound of pure horror. What are you doing here? Douglas hissed, stepping down from the dais. his face flushing red. Security, get this. Get her out of here. She's crashing. I'm not crashing. Douglas, I said, walking calmly toward him. I'm closing. Closing? He stopped. Confused. You announced the sale to Apex Holdings, I said, my voice carrying to the back of the room. You told your investors the wire transfer would clear at midnight. I held up my phone. The screen displayed a banking confirmation. Transfer complete. $12,500,000. I am Apex Holdings, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of 100 breaths held at once. Douglas looked at me, his brain trying to compute the impossible equation. The stepdaughter he stranded in the dunes. The estate manager he erased. The ghost. You? He stammered. You don't have. You're nothing. I am the owner of this house. I corrected him. And according to the deed I just digitally signed. You are trespassing. I turned to the DJ booth, where Nathaniel was waiting. He gave me a sharp nod. And Douglas? I smiled. But it didn't reach my eyes. I didn't just buy the house. I bought the history. All of it. I signaled Nathaniel. The music cut out. I took the microphone from the stand. The feedback whine pierced the room, making 100 wealthy heirs flinch. Douglas lunged for me. But 2 security guards stepped out from the shadows. They didn't move to stop me. They moved to block him. He stopped short. Confused. He forgot that security guards don't work for the people in the tuxedos. They work for the person who signs the checks. And as of midnight, that was me. You wanted to talk about the history of this house, I said, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. You told everyone here that you built this estate on integrity, on family values. I looked at the projection screen behind him, where a slideshow of Sierra's childhood photos had been looping. I nodded to the DJ booth. Nathaniel hit a key. The photos vanished. The screen went black. Then, a single document appeared. It was high resolution, magnified so even the people in the back row could read the fine print. It was a transfer of deeds dated 15 years ago. This is the purchase agreement for this property, I narrated, keeping my pace slow. Deliberate. $1,800,000. Paid in full. Cash. Stop this, Douglas screamed, his voice cracking. It's a fabrication. She's mentally unstable. And this, I continued, ignoring him, is the source of those funds. The image changed. It was a withdrawal slip from the James Harper Memorial Trust. My biological father's life insurance. The money meant for my education. My safety. My life. You stole my inheritance to buy your status, I said. But you were sloppy. Douglas, you needed a signature to release the funds. And since I was 17 and grieving, you decided to sign for me. The screen zoomed in on the signature line. Madeline Vance. The handwriting was jagged, forced. It looked nothing like mine. It looked exactly like the handwriting on the linen napkin he had given me the day he abandoned me in the dunes. Forgery, I stated. Wire fraud. Grand larceny. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. Sierra was sobbing now. A low, keening sound. But no one was comforting her. The guests were backing away, creating a wide circle around the family as if failure was contagious. Lies, Douglas roared, sweat dripping down his face, melting his stage makeup. You have no proof, just digital tricks. I thought you might say that, I said, so I brought a character witness. I pressed the button on the remote in my hand. The speakers didn't play music. They played a voicemail. It was time-stamped 3 years ago. Madeline. It's Douglas. Pick up the phone. You ungrateful brat. I need a loan. The auditors are sniffing around the shell company. If they find out about the trust transfer from 2008, I'm going to prison. I need 50 grand. Call me back. The audio quality was crystal clear. His voice, drunk and terrified, boomed through the ballroom. I played the next one. Victoria bought another necklace. I can't pay the mortgage. If we lose the house, they'll investigate the purchase history. You have to help me hide it. And the next? I should have left you on that beach permanently. 107 voicemails. I didn't play them all. I didn't have to. The first 3 were enough to turn the gilded glamour gala into a crime scene. Victoria looked at Douglas. Her face was a mask of crumbling plaster. She had spent a lifetime looking the other way, pretending the money appeared by magic. Now, the magic was gone, and only the crime remained. You recorded me? Douglas whispered. He looked small, defeated. I record everything, I said. It's part of the job description. The double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. It wasn't more guests. It was a team of officers from the New York State Police. Financial Crimes Division. Nathaniel had sent the packet over 3 hours ago. They were just waiting for the confession. They marched through the parted crowd, the sound of their heavy boots on the marble drowning out Sierra's weeping. They didn't ask Douglas to come quietly. They spun him around and cuffed him in front of his investors, his friends, and the daughter he had tried to marry off to save his skin. Douglas Vance, the lead officer said. You are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. As they dragged him away, he looked back at me. His eyes were wild, searching for the scared teenager he had bullied for years. He didn't find her. He found the landlord. I looked at the crowd. They were staring at me with a mixture of fear and awe. I didn't smile. I didn't take a bow. I just looked at the screen, where the image of my father's stolen trust fund still glowed. The bar is still open, I said into the microphone, but the party is over. The flashing lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, taking the noise and the chaos with them. The guests had scattered like roaches when the kitchen light flips on, leaving behind half-eaten canapes and the heavy scent of scandal. The ballroom was empty now, save for the debris of a party that had imploded. Victoria stood by the ice sculpture, which was slowly melting into a puddle on the marble floor. Sierra was slumped in a chair, staring at her phone, likely watching her social standing evaporate in real time. I walked over to them. The sound of my heels echoed in the cavernous room. It sounded like judgment. Madeline. Victoria choked out. She reached for me, her hands trembling. He tricked us too. You have to believe me. I didn't know. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me scrub floors while she lunched with the garden club. I looked at the mother who had let her husband strand me in the dunes because it was more convenient than fighting him. You knew, I said. You just didn't care as long as the checks cleared. I pulled a white envelope from my clutch. It matched the ivory of the walls I now owned. I held it out to her. What is this? She asked, terrified to take it. Eviction notice. I said, you have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Anything left behind becomes the property of Apex Holdings. 24 hours? Sierra shrieked, looking up. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know. I said, I suggest you start walking. As I watched them scramble to pack their bags, stuffing jewelry and clothes into Louis Vuitton duffels with panic in their eyes, I finally understood something. I realized why they had crumbled so instantly. For years, I thought they were giants. I thought they possessed some innate power that I lacked. But watching them now, stripped of the assets they had stolen, I saw them for what they really were. They were hollow. They had confused having with being. They thought that because they had the estate, the cars, and the clothes, they were powerful people. But power isn't something you buy. It's not a costume you put on for a gala. Power is what remains when you strip everything else away. When you took away their money, they ceased to exist. They evaporated. But when they took away my money, when they took away my home and my name, I became stronger. I became dangerous. Because my value wasn't in my bank account. It was in my spine. They were just renters in a life they couldn't afford. And the lease was up. The next morning, the house was silent. I stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean. The air smelled of salt and pine. But for the first time in 15 years, it didn't smell like fear. I had already filed the paperwork. The Vance estate was gone. The sign at the gate now read the Harper House, named after the father who had tried to protect me, whose legacy I had finally reclaimed. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold, clean air. It tasted like ownership. It tasted like peace. They had tried to bury me in the sand. They forgot that I was the tide, and the tide always returns. If Madeline's victory gave you chills, hit that like button and share this story. And if you've ever had to build your own empire from the ashes, tell me in the comments. I read every single one.